Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes podcast. We're here with Rafe Nielsen, who is the Director of Marketing and Communications for Browning. How are you?
Good, sir. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm pretty excited about this one.
Good.
We've all been gushing, so it's kind of hard for you to have fanboys, so I'll try to keep it at a professional level. But I've loved Browning since I was a kid. I've got plenty of your guys' products. The kind that are made out of metal and wood, and the kind that are good for camping and sleeping and keeping your hands warm and everything in between. So
Yeah.
pretty excited to have you here. Thanks for taking the time. Let's start off with a quick history of Browning.
Okay. Oh, that's, I don't know if you can be quick about a history with the company, right? But, the short story is John Moses Browning's the founder of it, obviously, and we kind of claim 1878 as our starting year. It was the first year that he had sold his patent over to the Winchester Company back east, and so we kind of take that as our starting point. But John Moses started his shop there in Ogden, Utah. About then, him and his brother Matthew, and their original game plan in building products was design. They were not manufacturing for the most part. They were inventors, and that's what he did. Is he drew up parts and guns and those types of things, and then he'd sell those designs off. And typically, for the first number of years, it was to the Winchester Corporation back east. So that was the historical guns of the model 94, 92, 95, 97, all of those that are still in operation now. That was the John Browning design. So some point in time, they moved over from the civilian market with Winchester, and he got into the military side of things. That's when he started designing things like the 1911, the BAR, the BMG, and those types of products throughout the 1900s, early 1900s, and then kind of returned back a little bit into the civilian market when he started with the A5, and it was turn of the century as well, and the SA-22 and the high power. And this final design being the Superpose, which is the over and under shotgun. So, and that's what he was working on when he died, actually, in Belgium. So there's a long start of that history where he started off designing guns for other companies. Remington built a lot of it, Colt built a lot of it, Winchester built a lot of those guns. And eventually he went over to Belgium for Fabrique Nationale. They started building those guns overseas as well. And so it was after his death that the real company, Browning, was formed, and it started actually doing the manufacturing, contracting with FN in Belgium, creating the guns, bringing them, importing them under the Browning name, and we've grown from there to where we're at now. So that's about as concise of a history as I can do for John Browning.
Well done. Yeah, so whether you like guns or not, every war movie you've ever watched has John Moses Browning's work in there,
yes,
right?
It does.
All the cowboys, pew pew, and then all the way up till the movie being made today.
Yes.
And obviously, probably an innate gift he was given, because it is kind of complex to design these, right? Lots of moving parts, lots of math, lots of physics, a little bit of common sense. I've taken apart 2 guns in my life, and they are still taken apart. I do not have the brain power to conceptually see how this whole thing should work.
Yeah.
And like a gunsmith, I would be a good customer, right? But it's a point of pride that they'll just sit there in the closet forever.
Yeah.
In defeat.
Yes.
Yeah. Clearly not my calling. Very cool. And then you guys are just in Morgan, Utah, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we John Moses started that company in Ogden, and it was in the 60s some time frame. We moved up into the Morgan Valley, had to get out of the city for a lot of testing purposes. Actually, it was getting too crowded to shoot guns there in downtown Ogden anymore. Yeah. So we had to find a place that we could still test products, and so we made our way up to the Morgan Valley. So we're out there just outside of Mountain Green.
Not a bad place to have a corporate headquarters.
It's a great place to have corporate headquarters.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. You've done something that doesn't happen very often in this world anymore, and you've been with the company almost 20 years.
Yep.
How did you get your start? And it's there's a lot to this next question. If you could just hit on a few points, what has changed over the 20 years?
I actually got my start there as a copywriter, and I actually started before then. I worked at Cabela's in City, Nebraska as an intern as a copywriter there. I got some experience there, and then I came home, finished school, and then the copywriting job came up, and used that resume to get a job there. So I started as a copywriter in the advertising department, and then moved over to product design and development for about 10 years, and then moved over to the marketing side for the last 10 or so years as well. So that's kind of my path. So it's been diverse. It's where I went to school in communications, did something wildly different in product development that I'd never done before, had no idea what I was doing, and then came back to the marketing side where I still don't know what I'm doing, but at least that's where I was trained at. So, but in terms of what's changed, man, that's a loaded question because everything has changed, really, to be honest with you. The way we go to market, the factories we work with, the technologies, what our strategies are. Literally everything has changed since I've started there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can add a little bit of context here because I was born in the early 80s, and the first time I ever went to Cabela's in Sydney, Nebraska, there was only two of them. There's one in Kearney and one in Sydney.
Yep.
And for us, it was like going to Mecca, right? Like
Yeah.
it had long been promised we were going to go to Cabela's. And our faces were glued to the windshield, like it's going to appear on the horizon, and it did.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best days of my life, right?
Yep.
Because I associated that with the Cabela's catalog.
Yep.
That was the only way to get stuff. And I never got anything. It was like, I'll circle this for Santa. I'll circle this for Mom.
Yep.
Well, that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, there's this thing called the Bargain Cave.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you need to go there. I'm like, okay, let's go. Well, that's expensive. Anyways, we finally accomplished it. And I can imagine, now, going to the Browning website or the Cabela's website, whatever it is, and there's Browning products. We might as well have been playing with like 2 sticks trying to get fire going. And now it's like flamethrowers all over.
Yes.
You know who your customer is. You know where they're coming from. It's like pretty insane.
Yeah.
So you guys have a lot of products. We've talked about the ones that go boom, but what are some other things that you guys produce and market?
Yeah, so we actually do have a pretty wide range of products in terms of what we would consider outdoor products, the non-firearm side of the business. So, in our office, we do technical hunting clothing, and that's a big category for us as well. Knives, flashlights, headlamps, those types of things. Also do a bunch of shooting and hunting accessories. That's a big part of our portfolio. We also have gun safes, we have camping, we have ammunition, we have lifestyle pieces, which is casual clothing, pet products, automotive, the whole pile of those kinds of things that we get into as well. A lot of that is licensee programs that we bring in terms of their licensees, but they're really part of the Browning family. So they're not inside of the walls of our corporate office, but we do work very closely with them to ensure that it's still a Browning product and meets our standards, and we make them part of our family. So across the board, yes, we have a wide range of products that carry the buck mark. And so really it's everybody who can, if you're not into hunting, you can still be part of the Browning family. You can buy a camping chair, or you can buy a t-shirt, or you can buy whatever it is that you like. And our brand speaks to really anybody in the outdoors business who wants to just be outside. We think it speaks that well, and we have products that kind of fit that. And if you are a fan of the brand, you don't have to go buy a $3,000 Satori shotgun. You still can go buy something that still carries a brand, a hat, t-shirt, those types of things, and still be a part of us. So
yeah, it's quite the tapestry, because you'll interact with people that have never been hunting and have zero desire to. In this particular example, they love the chairs, right? And so it's kind of nice as like a big multinational company. Obviously, it makes business sense. So I'd be interested in, at some point, you're starting to diversify things. You mentioned you lived in the product side and the research side and now the marketing side. How do you guys as a company decide when to pursue a new product, or possibly even like a whole new vertical?
Yeah. It goes a lot of into that in terms of like what we want to do, where we want to be, and a lot of it is where our brand is perceived as well. And we're a hunting company, we're a gun company, and that's really the focus of it. I'll step back slightly. we used to be really diverse. It sounds like we're diverse now, but back in the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, you look at the portfolio we had. We were into bicycles. We were into golf clubs, tennis rackets. We even did pole vaulting poles at one point in time. We actually we held at the time several world records and Olympic gold medals out of our pole vaulting poles. So wildly diverse, and then we've started to narrow in over the last 20, 30 years, whatever it's been now, into really what we are, and that's we are a hardcore gun company. That's what we do, and then anything that kind of supports that environment. So everything is kind of run around the idea of like, does this fit the brand? Is this something that our customer wants us to be a part of or not be a part of? And that really drives it. Is there's a lot of products we could get ourselves into, and then you realize that's probably better done by somebody who's single focused into that world. And we're finding that to be one of the bigger challenges is there's not a lot of like big depth of brands right now that have the depth of field and depth of product, because everyone wants to go to individual source companies who specialize in those things, right? So
Right.
it does add some challenges that we haven't had in the last 50 years. The company is really saying, all right, is this something that our consumer wants from Browning? And typically, if it is closely associated with the firearm, we do fairly well with that. And so that's really kind of where the decision making is, does this fit the customer base? Does this fit our brand? And does this fit around what we want to be as a firearms company and a hunting company?
Yeah. Fairly common sense. Yeah, because rarely are you out in the field unless you're maybe at the range. But even then, you need glasses and flashlights and bags.
Yep.
But usually you'll need, a sleeping bag and a tent and a flashlight and a knife. So just very commonsensical bolting on of things
Yep.
that kind of circulate around the gun.
Yep, exactly.
I have a Browning putter in my office,
Yep.
and my favorite wedge of all time was a Browning A wedge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I love those stories too, where it's like, I remember Browning made golf clubs, or I remember they did make tennis rackets.
Right.
And it was probably because there's a lot of smart people and there's maybe money on the balance sheet and there's factories, right? Like, oh, we can do that.
Yep.
We can do that. Sure.
Yeah.
Send it down our way, right?
Yep.
And then, but like at some point it's like, we probably shouldn't do all of that.
Right.
Let's refocus.
Yep. There are always those times you have to recenter and get yourself squared up back where you belong. And over the last 140 some odd years we've been around, there's obviously been a lot of that shifting. And luckily, over that course of time, it's a long time to always be able to be shifting and moving and recentering where we need to be. And we have to give everybody prior to our time there at the company a really good props for doing a great job of keeping us centered through the ages of refocusing where we need to be. And we feel like we're in a pretty good spot today. I think they were in a good spot in the 70s. They were in a good spot in the 30s.
Yeah.
They just always were able to adapt and change and keep up to date of what the consumer wants out of the brand.
Yeah. What the consumer wants. Constantly moving target, right?
Mm-hmm.
How far do you guys try to look around the corner into the future of what they might want? Because they're fickle.
Yep.
What is a big company like you guys? What is your vision in like trying to get ahead of it?
A lot of it is just watching other tech companies. Actually, we tend to follow a little bit behind some of the most highest advancements, right? So we always like to watch what other companies are doing outside of our space as well, and what the new technologies are, and see how that would apply to the firearms space. So we are watching outside of our industry a lot to see what's going on, what's driving stuff. And then a lot of it is just flat out listening to customers. They're the ones out there in the field. They're the ones doing it. They're the ones that have the passion for this. And so when they're out there, they're having experience on the mountain. They're looking at their product going, man, I wish this gun did this, right? I wish it had lower recoil. I wish it shoot farther or faster or was lighter weight or whatever it is, because they're the ones, it's a passion industry, right? So the consumers are the ones that are driving this going, this is what I need. And you have to be very sensitive and listen to what your customers have to say and say, hey, that's kind of where this trend is headed. This is where we need to be. And you have to keep up on the technology side as well as the desire side from those who are using your product in a very passionate way.
Yeah. And is this done through like, high-tech surveying, or is it done in just the old-fashioned, how did that gun do in that elk hunt?
Honestly, a lot of it's just flat out old-fashioned. We spend a lot of times with our dealers and talking with the guys who are buying our product at the dealer level and saying, what are the customers coming in and saying? What are the comments in on social media or forums? And we follow that. We spend a lot of time at trade shows and consumer shows and talking with people who come in and tell us their stories. And so we have a pretty good community. We have a great following. There's no shortage of ideas that come through our office from the outside. And a lot of it's just plain old customer feedback that really kind of drives a lot of that information. And we just make sure we keep our ears to the ground and understand. We get involved in a lot of those things. We're out there in the field hunting ourselves. We're shooting competitions. We're boots on the ground is a big part of knowing what's coming up and what we need to be doing.
Very cool. You mentioned no shortage of like ideas. I assume if you make mention in a certain circle of people that you work for Browning, you're going to get constant feedback, unsolicited,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
My guess is there's some diamonds in the rough every once in a while. Like, you guys have thousands of employees. There's hundreds of thousands of unsolicited pieces of feedback. How do you guys systematize and organize like what bubbles to the top?
A lot of it is what you hear as a trend, right? So rarely do you hear like one good idea that nobody else has thought of already.
Yeah.
It's typically something you see in, an outdoor rider has mentioned it to you, then a dealer has mentioned it to you, then a consumer has mentioned it to you, then you see it somewhere else in another field. You're like, okay, I can see where this is all starting to come together. It's not a Johnny One Note. One thing about passion companies and passion industries is that you have to be careful filtering some of that stuff out because you can get people who get way into the weeds and think something is super, super important.
Yeah.
And it's only super important to them because they're so passionate about what that is. And so you have to make sure that you really are listening to all sides of the input to make sure that you're not following and going down rabbit holes. Because in a passion industry like we have, it's super easy to go down a rabbit hole of personal interest that doesn't really fit the consumer as a broad whole.
Yeah. I would imagine, like if you could reincarnate an employee that was in, Browning in the 1970s, it looks and does a lot of the same things, but it's lighter,
mm-hmm.
more accurate,
mm-hmm.
oftentimes easier to use.
Yep.
And my guess is they would be like, this is exactly what is supposed to happen. There's supposed to be improvements,
yep.
right?
That's the hope, yeah.
And, maybe we stop at lasers, right? It still needs to be called hunting.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I assume you've got dozens of these types of friends where they've got every gadget and doodad, right? And if they ever miss, heaven help them because
yes.
it's going to be like you have zero excuses.
Yep.
You were literally like guided on where to shoot.
Uh-huh.
And you still missed.
Yeah.
So that's user error, right?
It is. It's always user error at some point in time. Yes.
And then, like once you guys kind of, you mentioned, you got the various data endpoints. What is kind of a timeline for a product, completing a new product or a tweak of a current product?
Mm-hmm.
How long does that take?
It really depends. Firearms are a pretty complicated piece of machinery, and can, from start to finish on a brand new platform, would take several years. The ability to move on a variant of that can take within a couple months to a year or so. So it really depends on the complexity of it. But new platforms are several years out, to be honest with you. I know we're looking at a lot of things, and when we look planning-wise, I know there's things on the docket for 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Like
Yeah.
we're looking that far out and what these platforms look like and what's going to change and what manufacturing capabilities are. So we really do try to look out a long ways in terms of what we need to be, where we need to be, what we can handle. So it's a long timeline in a lot of ways. Some things move fast, some things move slow, just by the complexity of both the design and the capabilities.
Yeah. And you guys were like a multinational
mm-hmm.
company long before that was a cool thing, right?
Yeah.
Out of necessity, and like that's where a lot of the quality was. Portugal.
Yep.
Belgium.
Yep.
Japan.
Yep.
To name a few. A lot of different cultures, a lot of different languages, a lot of different time zones there.
Yep.
Who kind of leads out on those relationships?
We have a pretty good global team. So we have our U.S. office, obviously, here in Morgan, Utah, and we have an international office in Belgium. And between the two offices, we communicate frequently, almost, I'm sure daily, with the product managers, and the engineers are always constantly talking about what needs to do and what happens and where stuff needs to go. There's obviously some strengths in certain factories in certain countries that it's a foregone conclusion that that's where products are going to be made. Sometimes there's some debate about where we can take it. But it's just a line of communication that, in today's world, it's pretty easy to communicate with anybody throughout the world. You just have to stay up late or get up early. You can have a phone call with just about anybody and go through those processes. And so, it's a full team of usually the product management and the engineers that really get together and kind of decide and figure out how all that spaces out.
Yeah. You mentioned like materials and supply chains and factories, like the guns and the camping equipment. They're made out of a lot of different stuff. It's just not wood and metal and canvas, right? Obviously, a lot of high tech stuff that you guys need to be aware of. But you guys also kind of do a cool thing where you tell people where it's from, right? Portugal, Japan, America, Belgium. How difficult was the last couple of years with the COVID supply chain issues?
We had a few hiccups, but honestly, we were relatively untouched from the standpoint of supply. Our factories did a great job of foreseeing a lot of those issues, having enough parts in play. We had very few hiccups in terms of parts problem. There's a few, of course. Our biggest challenges that we had during that last 3 years of supply chain and all that kind of stuff was really ports and importing, getting stuff. We had a lot of containers sitting out on ships just outside of the port waiting to get in. And that was honestly the biggest holdup was transportation more than anything. That was, once we got through that, everything seems to be functioning now fairly well. Like I said, the supply chain in terms of products, parts, those types of stuff, relatively untouched. We had that was our biggest challenge with the shipping portion of it.
Gotcha. I'd be interested in how you kind of couple up these things, because like my mother has zero desire to hunt, right? But she does own a lot of Browning products for camping and outdoor activities, versus, like a shotgun. You've got to factor in the margins, the margins of marketing to my mother versus me. Ultimately, it all culminates in kind of a business decision. These are like low margins, but it's a big market, high margins, small market. How do you guys as an executive team kind of manage that whole process?
Yeah, it is kind of an interesting way of going about it. Firearms, obviously, again, bread and butter. That's where we're at. That's what we're known for. And that's where that's where our company is, right? But those other products, so camping, T-shirts, hats, those types of stuff are great. We consider that as much as branding and marketing materials as they are products out there to use. So it's actually quite easy as long as we have maintained that reputation. We know where we can go in terms of product lines, what people will be interested in, and kind of let the product managers kind of run that show of saying, hey, I think we can sell a whole bunch of hats into these areas, and that's great for our brand. It's great for our consumers. And so, the focus, again, is always on the firearms. The other side is, I don't want to call it ancillary because it's still a huge part of our business. There's some challenges in covering so many different pieces of it. We have great product managers who know their segment. They know where they belong. They know what products are going to be hits and misses for the most part. And so we let the product managers really kind of take hold and say, hey, here's some place we think we can get inroads, and here's where we need to stay, and let's not talk about that product because we don't need to get in that category. And so we just let the product managers kind of run with it, and they do a great job for the most part.
Yeah. There's a lot of competition in firearms, and it's always funny to be the end consumer, because if you're showing up for a duck hunt and one of the people, you got the invite, and the other three you don't know, it won't be long before they say, what are you shooting there?
Yep.
And it could be dozens of answers, right? But it's like the monkey brain of people, like they're lining you up and figuring out who's legit based on the shotgun.
What they bring, yeah.
Your dad might have given it to you, right? Or you might have bought it that day before, and it was the only one left on the shelf.
You're right.
And so it's funny. But ultimately, in that scenario, for Browning, you would like it to be, this is the best shotgun there based on price, looks, durability, and that it functions the way it should, right?
Yep.
Because I assume there's ones that are priced higher and lower. where do you guys ultimately want to sit?
Our kind of our goal and where we think we fit for the most part is in that upper mid tier. We're not at the custom level. We're not producing $10,000 firearms, which is they're out there, obviously both on the shotgun side and the rifle side. We're not producing the lowest entry level stuff either. Our bread and butter, our sweet spots in that upper tier of product where we do have the ability to produce a product that it's obtainable for most people, especially if you're affluent. You certainly can get into it. If you're not, it's something that you can obtain if you save up for it and you can get to it and you can get there. They're not out of reach, but they are higher priced. But having those products gives us the ability to produce some very cool stuff, both from a quality level and as well as a functionality and a performance and a feature level set. We can put a lot of stuff onto those guns, make them very valuable in terms of what we bring to the table. For the X-Bolt, our rifle, one of the interesting kind of case studies that we've seen with it is we had that rifle for 5 or 6 years, and it was basically a wood stock or a composite stock gun, and it did fine for us, right? And as soon as we started to kind of embellish that, and we started putting camouflage stocks and Cerakote barrels and receivers on it, and carbon fiber stocks on it, and long range configurations, the more we did to that product line and elevated it, the better success we had with that. And so we kind of found that, what people want out of our brand is the best, but they also have to afford it. So that's kind of where we hit. It was, here's where we can provide a solid product, add a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of features, a lot of cool stuff, and still keep it within a reasonable price frame where people can get to it. We hit a home run on that one, and that's kind of a really cool case studies we've looked at, is that the more we did to it, the more features, the more we elevated that product, the more popular it became, and better success it was for us.
Yeah, very cool. And you guys could probably see the fruits of your labor over a season or two, I would imagine, with that.
Yep, you sure can.
So it's not instant, but it is pretty quick.
Yes.
To see if you guys were right or wrong.
Yep.
And I assume there's been some instances where you're like, oh, we missed on that one.
Sure.
How do you guys as a team decide to kind of like mothball it, or I don't know what the parlance is you guys would use, but like not everything's going to work.
Yep. The nice part about it is that we do have the ability with our factories to kind of ramp up and down based upon what we see and what the demands are. A lot of our business model is to produce a product, take orders, see how people react to it, what they like about it, what they don't. Things that aren't as popular, we just don't have to build as much of them. We can be able to build what was asked of us, small runs, get out of that business and find something else that worked in its place. And so, obviously we will find some things that aren't as popular as we thought they would be, but we're able to produce them still in slow runs, small runs, and then move them out and find something else and new to do. And I think it's really important that we have some of those misses, to be honest with you, because you got to see how far you can push the boundaries. And that's honestly some of where our biggest misses were, is when we pushed a little too far and went, got to bring it back down. Yeah. Here's where we need to be. But it gave us room of growth. We see how far we can push. And we've never really hurt the brand by coming out with anything that was terrible, because we were able to cycle through it and get out of it and find the next thing that was better than that was. Yeah,
I imagine. You guys have kind of a benefit of free marketing if people like what they're using, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I assume there's, there's not as many as there used to be, but there's probably just folks that will only shoot Browning, right? What is that like to tap into that, where people are just like, for free?
Yep.
Evangelists and happy with everything.
Yeah. Honestly, I love those people. They make my job as a marketing guy super easy. We appreciate those fans, and it's not only just free, but these guys are buying products and displaying them. They're buying stickers for the back of their trucks. They're buying hats. They're buying T-shirts. They're buying all the stuff with our logo wear on it, and they're advertising for us and are brand loyal to us. And we don't take those people for granted by any means. Those people are the most important customer base that we have, as well as the legacy guys, fathers and grandfathers, and those who have had those products in the past. That's what the kids end up buying, because they've had that great experience over the years. Grandpa talked about it, Dad talked about it, great-grandpa talked about it. That's what got passed down to them. If they get a Satori passed down to them that was 50 years old, they're more willing to buy a brand new one because they've had such a great experience with it. So brand reputation is super important to us. Customer experience is super important to us. And, we wouldn't be where we're at without our customer base and what they have provided to us, their feedback. their ability to carry the brand for us, and we appreciate them greatly. We've done a great job on our side to create the product that they can fall in love with. They've done a great job of falling in love with it and broadcasting that message for us, and they're our most important asset to our company, 100%.
Yeah. There's this other group that they've always existed in one form or another, but now they're like very blatant and out there, whether they're influencers or the micro famous, or they're going to be famous for the next 10 years, right?
Yep.
Like, not that long ago, but it seems like the olden days, like inevitably before, the election day when goose or duck season would open, the candidates would always go duck hunting.
Yeah.
I remember even John Kerry,
Yep.
right? Like a week or two before the November election, he's walking in a field with some geese, and
Right.
I immediately was looking at like, what kind of shotgun was that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got folks that have their own TV shows and their own. How aggressive are you guys in courting them, or do you prefer that they come to you? What is the marriage there like?
A little bit of both. There's some folks who will reach out to us, and obviously there's a lot of people who will reach out to us, and we appreciate that. And we try to join with as many people as we can because their voices are important. Like I said, the customer experience is important, but so is that third-party voice that is out there. From a buying standpoint, whether it's our product or really anybody else's or any other industry, you tend to listen to people that you trust, right? And that's a big piece of our business. And so we get involved with, you can call them influencers today, but really it's the guys that are out there using them. And sometimes that's grassroots, sometimes that's national. So we partner with large television shows from the Outdoor Channel and Sportsman's Channel. We partner with folks who have good social media followings. What we tend to focus on as much as anything is finding the people who are the most authentic, the guys who are real about it. There's a lot of fake out there. There's a lot of entertainment out there that do it, and they're fine. They do a good job, and by no means we discount them too, because that's needed as well. Mm-hmm. But for our brand and for our products, because of how technical they are and how high priced they are and what the nature of them, we tend to partner with people who are the most authentic, who have the most experience, who can speak with great deal of authority, because that's who's going to buy our products, the people who listen to those folks more than the side of the entertainers or the micro influencers, those types of things. We want to make sure we partner with those that are the most serious and most authentic that we can get.
Yeah. So like you and your team are always on your toes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of moving parts as we're kind of illustrating here.
Yep.
On you got to keep a lot of plates up in the air as you're juggling these, yep. Right? I assume it's pretty fun and stimulating. Selfish question: over the last couple of years, like steel shot has been expensive,
yep.
or even tough to find. Just for the layman's answer, why was that?
Demand. At the end of the day, there's just more people asking for product, and as soon as that higher demand raises, those products go off the shelves, and as soon as people see them go off the shelves, they panic and then they buy everything they can buy. So really, it was a combination of truly an increase in participation that you just can't solve that, right? Because companies are used to building X number of products every year in, year out, with some growth or whatnot. And when it exceeds beyond what you can forecast, then you just have empty shelves. Yeah. And that's what it boiled down to. And then you had some panic buying, obviously. As soon as a box hit the shelf, whether you needed it or not, you bought it because it was standing there, right? So yeah. That's really all it boiled down to. Was those last 3 years or so has been a huge increase in participation for shooting and hunting both. And so it's just hard to keep up with the growth that was that steep so fast.
Yeah. And then you got some imbecile like me sitting in the aisle, and like, it's just gunpowder, a primer, and plastic. It can't be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
But when you scale it,
yep,
it is.
Yeah, that's it. It's just a scale issue, and it's just the demand. And when a store is used to getting, so from our standpoint, 50 firearms a month or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would last them for 3 or 4 months. So all of a sudden, the demand goes up, and that goes down to 1 month, and now they go 3 or 4 months without having that product in line, and you're waiting for the manufacturer to catch up. That's where your gaps are. It was just a pure spike in growth.
Yeah,
hard to foresee that. It's hard to maintain that, and so that's really kind of what you fell into. It's a good problem to have. You have a bunch of demand of products. I think one of the important things to talk about, though, for us as well as the industry as a whole, is I don't think anybody was producing less products over the last 3 years. We were all producing as many, or if not more, products than we've ever produced in the past. That's one thing we get a lot of feedback from on Facebook or social media is, how come I can't find this? Why aren't you producing it? We are producing it. 100% we're producing it in higher quantities than we've ever produced. They're just off the shelves a whole lot faster. And if you're not there when the shipment comes in, you're not going to see it. So it's not been a problem of supplying it. It's just been a problem of a higher demand on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, that's where you guys probably really appreciate, the big data and the computers.
Yeah.
But then obviously like smart people that have seen this before, like, yeah, the barbarians at the gate, they won't be forever. And we
Right.
could be stuck with like a bunch of inventory, and
Yes.
it's just business.
Yep. It's just business.
Yeah. I was at Cal Ranch and I'm like, 410. Give me some 410. He's like, I'm so sorry, this is embarrassing. And he slid it across the counter, and it was $55
Yeah.
for 20 shells.
Mm-hmm.
And I slid it back, and I'm like, I'm sorry you had to do that. And he's like, I don't know what's going on.
That's crazy. It's crazy.
You guys are kind of at the forefront because the end product is, the guns and the stuff that support the guns. There's lots of organizations like Ducks Unlimited,
Right.
Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Lots. Those are probably strategic and important partnerships, because ultimately at the end of the day, like, there needs to be conservation, right?
Yes.
Like, we need Mother Earth and all of her animals to be very healthy.
Yep.
The ecosystems need to work well. Who kind of leads out on those relationships? Because there's a lot.
Yeah. You actually hit on two of the bigger ones. RMEF, the Elk Foundation, is probably one of the biggest and best organizations that we partner with. Those guys really have dialed in their messaging and what they're there to do, and they really do have a great track record of putting elk on the ground, saving habitat. They're a great group. Ducks Unlimited the same way. They understand their purpose. They know where the importance of their dollars go, and so those are two organizations you mentioned. The NWTF, the Turkey Foundation, is another great one. Pheasants Forever is another fabulous one as well. These organizations really know what they're doing. The Sheep Foundation, that's a new one for us that we just got involved with the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
We look at it from the standpoint of who's doing the best work, putting the most money on the ground, who's really making an impact. And you look at it from the standpoint of what they're doing on the ground, as well as who's following them, and you have the right customer base in those circles, and watch who those are. And to be honest, we listen to those customers quite well, because if you're a part of an organization, a conservation group, you're into it, right? You're not
Yeah.
just a weekend warrior. You have interest. You've paid money to improve your industry and your lifestyle. And those guys are serious about what they do. And so I use the Sheep Foundation as a great organization. That's one who's, if you're a member of that group, you're definitely into this, right?
Yeah.
So we pay attention to what those guys have to say. And same with the others we've mentioned. Those guys are all really dedicated into the space. Very important consumers. Speaks a lot for the industry and the participants in our sport, where we're willing to put up our dollars where our interests are. We're not taking advantage of the resources that are out there. We're not just living off of the backs of whatever the government agency, whether the Forest Service or BLM or whoever says, here's a trail or here's some habitat. We're not waiting for somebody to make our sport better. Our people are getting involved and doing those things and making our industry, our sport, our lifestyle better by their own dollars.
Yeah.
And that's a huge testament to our customers and our people and our sport, is that we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. And so we value those conservation groups and the members of those conservation groups highly. They're very important to us. They're essential to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Of all the relationships in business, I think those ones are some of the best, where it benefits both parties and the end consumer.
Yep.
Right. It's very well done.
Yeah.
We could go for 4 days with this one, but you've got a busy life and you've got things to do. So
that's all right.
What is your favorite Browning firearm?
Ooh, that's a great question. I own them all, to be honest. I've taken the time to make sure over the last 20 years, what makes it easy when you stretch out time, but I own them all. And I think at the end of the day, if I was going to boil it right down to it, I'm a Satori guy. Beautiful over and under is the epitome of our sport, the nature of it. It combines the technology, it combines the art and the beauty of it. They're a great heirloom piece. My kids fight over them when I die, who gets what, right? I've done the same thing to my dad. I've already claimed a bunch of his as well. So
Yeah.
when you talk about favorite firearms, it's hard to not go with the kind of the classic of a Satori. That's high on my list. After that, I'd go with our X-Bolt rifle, just from a standpoint because it's the most advanced from technology, from performance standpoint. There's nothing it can't do. So I would pick those two as my two choices.
Very cool. And when you're not, doing the business of Browning, and obviously, like, again, you can't probably go anywhere without somebody giving you an opinion on hunting or fishing or camping. What do you like to do that's completely outside the industry that, whereas, like, I would love to only talk about this. What do you like to do when it's not those topics?
I love to fly fish. That's a big piece of it, and fishing anything. And then I golf quite a little bit too. So I like to stay active that way. So
Very cool.
kind of my two other side hobbies.
But you don't use Browning golf clubs?
My dad had a set, and he sold it. Unfortunately, I wish he'd always kept them. But no, I don't have a set of Browning clubs anymore.
I have no idea if they were good or not in the time that they were, but I surely loved that A wedge.
Yeah,
It was
they're great clubs.
And it was black, and it had the buck mark.
Yep.
And I liked that it was in my golf bag and then in the gun safe.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Like, good for these guys. Thank you so much, Ray, for taking the time to join us today. I've learned a lot. Obviously, it started as one of my favorite podcasts we'll ever done. So
Good.
Appreciate you letting us be fanboys, and congrats on all that you guys have done. And again, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here, and love to come back anytime you want us.
All right.